or we have a saying rather, many are called, but few are
Yes,
chosen.
yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, anyone can say that they're a leader,
Yeah.
but if you turn around and there's no one following you,
Yep.
who are you leading?
You're just taking a walk.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ahmad Ashar Thompson, the host of the iLEAD podcast, the place you come to learn, empower, adapt, and disrupt. And ladies and gentlemen, do I have a treat for you today? This opportunity, this podcast sometimes feels selfish because I get to sit with people that I respect, admire, honor, and for the things that they've done, both for the Bahamas, but also for the world at large. And this particular guest, I like her. She is so good. I'm so excited for this conversation because I like this lady. She's a fan of my mom. My mom is a fan of hers. And if the two of them get together, fanning over one another, there's value in that alone. So I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing you to our guest today, Mrs. Loretta Butler-Turner.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. What an amazing intro. I want to thank you. I want to shout out to your mom because really it's because of her that I like you.
Yes, Mom.
But no, she's an amazing, both your parents
Thank
actually.
you so much. Yes,
thank
Mom.
God for that.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for having me here on your
Absolutely.
podcast.
It is an honor to welcome you here today to talk about the things that matter most in leadership. On our podcast, Loretta, we want to ensure that people are leaving better than they came to the episode. We want them to leave with principles, strategies, a way forward, a blueprint to be a better version of themselves. And what I find is unique about your perspective is that you have this wonderful way of meshing what was with what is to come. And I want to start the podcast, this episode, like I do every other episode. Who is Loretta Butler-Turner?
I guess, that's a great question for me to answer because depending on who you would ask that question of, I'm sure they would have different interpretations as to who I am. But my authentic self, Ahmad, is, first of all, I'm a very proud Bahamian woman.
Yes.
I am now a widow, but I was a happily married wife.
Yes.
I am a mother, obviously a daughter. Family means a whole lot to me. And I have been involved in various aspects over my lifespan, from business to politics, back into business, and also consultancy.
Yes.
I am a passionate advocate for things that are important to women and boys and girls in particular, as well as I'm very passionate about our country, the Bahamas, which I think is the most amazing place to be,
Yes.
to live, to grow. And so I am a Bahamian.
Yes. There's this level of pride, this level of appreciation and admiration for who you are, but also an awareness of who you are. What have you, in your experience, found awareness to do for leadership or lack of awareness?
Well, I've got to tell you, for me to talk about myself, Ahmad, it's very important for me to talk about where I come from.
Yes.
I come from a long family lineage of service. From the time we were born, my family has been in business. And I think that as Black Bahamians, as Black successful Bahamians, the basis of everything that we've ever done has been about service.
Wow.
The food industry, the funeral industry, the educational arena. I've had so many examples of how we can not just be better citizens, but how we can also nurture and help others around us through service. And I think that that is key to anyone that truly finds themselves in a position of leadership.
Yes.
Because first of all, you've got to learn that leadership is not bestowed or you cannot bestow leadership upon yourself. Leadership is something that is given to you by others.
Yes.
Persons who feel that you are a person of influence, that are willing to be influenced by you.
Yes.
That creates the leadership.
Wow. What happens though when someone decides I am the leader versus being selected or chosen as the leader? Because I feel like there are moments when people assert themselves for the glamour of it all versus earning the right to be called leader.
Well, truly, I believe that there are, the Bible says, or we have a saying rather, many are called, but few are chosen.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, anyone can say that they're a leader.
Yeah.
But if you turn around and there's no one following you,
Yep.
who are you leading?
You're just taking a walk.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's be realistic here. Sometimes people are promoted to leadership by others as well. And essentially, I believe that it's your entire being that determines whether you're effective, because effective leadership is going to have a following. It's also going to have a magnetism where their following will grow.
Yes.
When you reach a position where you're not growing and you're not helping the people behind you to become leaders, then of course you're going to have an attrition, I feel. You're going to become less relevant.
Yes.
Then of course that's the time to exit.
Absolutely.
That's your cue, exit. But I think that's another thing. Sometimes people are very good leaders, but they don't know when they've reached their expiration date.
Wow. Now that's a word because I don't want to exit. It means that I'm holding on to either what I once had in this realm of leadership, or I'm concerned that I've not done enough.
Or I love the position.
The power, the
I love the
authority.
power and the position.
Wow.
When you lose your vision, when you lose your ability to influence, when you lose your ability to help create others around you, I believe, this is just my belief,
Yes.
I believe that's when you begin your downward spiral to becoming less effective and eventually irrelevant.
Wow.
And so, sometimes when you talk about succession, especially in like family businesses,
Yes.
for example,
Yes.
and I want to use that because that is the genesis of where I come from. Coming up under my parents, there were times when I felt like, boy, they've been here so long and they still doing things the old-fashioned way. And then us, we come up, we think we're new generation, new thought leaders, new influencers, and we want them to move, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
you find that they're no longer connecting, but it's difficult to move them because they created this
Yes.
this sort of business.
Yes.
And that's when, you realize that you've got to also stepping into your succession, that you've got to also be gentle with how you sometimes move people, not telling them they're irrelevant, but,
Yes.
easing them out of that position and start taking on more of their responsibility, because sometimes they're also waiting to see if you can prove yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's
I
a lot
built
of
this.
there's a lot of sweat equity
Yes.
that leaders put into whatever they do, whether it's business, whether it's politics, whatever. There's a lot of sacrifice, and they want to know that it's not going to end with their departure.
Yes.
And so that's why you sometimes see reluctant leaders not wanting to have a succession plan.
Yeah.
I mean, let me use a great example
Sure.
that the world would have watched. You remember Queen Elizabeth II?
Yes.
For years, everyone was like, boy, do you think Prince Charles will ever have an opportunity to be king? And she was just such a dominant, such an amazing woman, even late into her life.
Yes.
And I believe the people of Great Britain and all of the colonies truly loved her.
Yes.
She actually served up until her dying day.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I guess for King Charles now, there were many years he was practicing for the position.
Yes.
But even now, you realize that maybe she was one of those persons that still had relevance when she departed. So I think leadership is also about the amount of relevance you still are able to have, the amount of influence you're still able to have. At her death, she was still well loved.
Yes.
So there are times when, yes, that transition will happen naturally, as in her case. And there are times when, it's maybe not a natural succession where you have to sort of help.
I should have out of the way.
Yeah,
Help them along the
absolutely.
journey.
Absolutely.
Loretta, tell us about what shaped your viewpoint of leadership. You are a child, you are with cousins and sisters and brothers, and you're being reared. How is your upbringing influencing now your leadership style and your outlook on leadership?
Well, first of all, I think it begins with education.
Yes.
There were two facets of our life growing up Butler that was very important. The first thing was being Christ-centered. Church was at the center of everything, Christianity, the values and respect for the love of God, and of course, respect for others and all what the Ten Commandments says. Secondly, our forebears, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, who fortunately for me, I knew the great-grandparents, I knew the grandparents, of course, the parents, and of course, my siblings. So we were always grounded in very good education. Our parents always felt that we had to have the best education because they felt that education was the key to progress.
Yes.
Education was always the key to making good choices, decisions. And outside of that, with that education, we were also taught to be independent in our thinking. We're always instilled, don't follow the crowd, do not follow the crowd. Sometimes you're going to walk to the beat of a different drummer.
Yes.
And I think therein lies a very powerful lesson for leadership because a lot of kids grow up following the crowd.
Yes.
We were always taught that we could be different, not better, but we could be different.
Yes.
And not be ridiculed for being different. So I think those are principles that are taught inherently through your family. And those have to be fostered, nurtured, and encouraged. As kids on Sundays after church, we were also taught, people say, boy, they could talk, But what did we do on Sunday afternoons? We gathered after church.
Yes.
We gathered as generational village community in our grandparents' houses. And what we did was, besides having our Sunday meals together, we then had to recite the lessons, the collect, the commandments, and we had to sometimes stand up and recite that for the adults and the other cousins and siblings and everything.
Wow.
So you also were generally being taught how to be a public speaker.
Yes.
Which instilled a lot of confidence in you. And I think that when we look at how that impacts our lives today, I think that family and history helps to mold us into the beings that we develop to be because, you're not going to depart from those things that you're taught.
Yes.
I mean, you may sort of come off course here and there, but generally you're going to come back to the foundation of what you've been taught. So in terms of leadership, you're learning to develop your mind through education. You're learning to be an independent thinker. You're learning not to follow the crowd. Therefore, you want to be a critical thinker. You want to be able to analyze things for yourself. And I'm going to just tell you how within my family,
Yes.
how for me personally, my walking to a different beat actually affected some people because when you look at my grandfather, who was a giant in PLP politics,
Yes.
and you look at the family generally being PLP, and then here I am, come up in 2000, 2001, I'm going to become an F&M candidate. My goodness, could you imagine the ridicule I would have gotten from certain fronts? But, I also had family members that said, hey, we paid a lot for her education, for her
Yes.
to think, for her to be able to analyze and determine. She's an independent thinker.
Yes.
And so sometimes you're going to go totally against what is tradition.
Yes.
And you're going to, sort of blaze your own trail. So I'm not saying that created me into being a leader, but it certainly did not prevent me from embracing that opportunity.
Yes.
And sometimes you are going to have to go off to prove yourself in a different arena.
The thing you said just now about breaking the tradition, right? At the cost of potentially losing family or facing ridicule or being criticized and so on and so forth. Why was that important for you to do? Because while you could be taught to march to the beat of a different drummer or taught to think differently, sometimes what we teach our children, we don't expect them to do, right? Especially when it goes against what we believe is best. How did you get the
Well, I
The
think when you
audacity,
look,
if you will.
yeah, audacity,
Yes.
audacious. They were like, "Oh my God, this is diabolical. She's too audacious. This is crazy." But when you look at my life,
Yes.
I grew up in a household with two sons and five daughters. My parents
Wow.
had seven children. I was the last daughter. My father. You look at the Bahamian. The makeup of Bahamian families, especially you look at a Butler family, they're very patriarchal.
Yes.
When my grandfather named his business, it wasn't Milo B. Butler and Sons and Daughters. It was Milo B. Butler and Sons, even though he had daughters. My father grew up
That's
in,
good. I like that.
my father created Butler's Funeral Homes. He always felt, okay, fine, my daughters will be smart, but my sons are going to carry this business on, just
Yes.
like the sons carried on my grandfather's business.
Yes.
So, none of my brothers, they didn't want to do funeral business.
Yeah.
And reluctantly, when I told my father I'm going to do funeral business, because I really had dreams of doing something else, and boy, you better find a real job.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided I'd do funeral business. I could see almost his heartbreak, almost his disbelief.
Yes.
You mean a daughter can carry on my business?
Wow.
A daughter?
Yeah.
I got these two sons and none of them care. So, I think from a very early age, I've always had the opportunity of, if you will, fitting myself into a different stride, an unexpected stride, a
Yes.
man's world,
Yes.
if you will.
Yes.
So at 18 years of age, graduating and going into my family business formally, apprenticing under my dad, even though he was teaching me, I could almost feel his reluctance, his hope that maybe, Raleigh Butler Jr. will be carrying on his
Yes.
legacy, or maybe his second son, Craig, would be carrying on. Not Loretta, So I had to prove myself. And I believe that through that, it helped to thicken my coat, my skin.
Yes.
When I entered into that arena, I was asked, am I the secretary?
Wow.
Am I anything that was stereotypical
Yes.
female?
Yes.
Now, I was apprenticing under my dad at that time, learning how to do all of the scientific embalming and everything, learning that stuff before I formally went off to college to do it myself. And so I would go and drive the hearse. And now think back, this is in the 70s,
Yes.
And when you think of an undertaker or a mortician, you just think of men at that time.
Yes.
Now here's this young woman, attractive, driving a hearse.
Yes.
Even when the police saw me, they would do double takes.
What's going on here?
Exactly. So I think from from my teenage years,
Yes.
I learned that it's okay to disrupt things, if you
Yes,
will.
yes.
Break the stereotype.
Yes.
Become that trailblazer. So I was the first female to become a qualified licensed embalmer and funeral director. I was the first to do things before that. And so it was almost natural when I was invited by then leader, let's see, I think he would have been Prime Minister. Yes, Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham.
Yes.
When he invited me to be a standard bearer for the F&M. Well, obviously, I had, over the years, we created a wonderful working relationship. I respected him a whole lot. I love the fact that he was an underdog who came up and,
Yes.
he was the first person to be able to displace a government that had been in place for 25 years.
Yes.
So, I really looked at him from a heroic perspective. Why shouldn't I follow a hero?
Yeah.
And so, yes, my family, they had to do a double take and they had to think about all the sacrifice we did for the
Yes,
PLB.
my
And you talking about
Lord.
you good at F&M?
Yeah.
So, it's been those sort of things that I never even gave a second thought to
Yes.
because I know that I believed in it. And as long as I believed in it, that was the most important thing. You don't have to share your dreams and your visions and your beliefs with anyone. When it comes to being, they don't like it? Well, tough. That's their business.
Yeah.
You have to be, I believe, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have to believe in yourself and what you're
Yes.
doing. When you start second guessing what you want to do, you're being influenced by others.
Absolutely. That is so good. You are a teenager At what point in your teenage years did you realize that I do want to take over this business? I do want to become. Are you the first funeral director in the country or just for your family?
No, the first female in the Bahamas to be qualified. There were women, obviously, always that worked in funeral service, administrative, that type of thing, but to be a practicing practitioner that actually embalms, that does it. I was the first female.
Wow.
And I actually enjoyed it, but that was not my first dream.
Okay.
It was almost it was my secondary choice.
Okay.
Ultimately, I had been very involved in high school theater, public speaking, debating, all of those things. I really felt a passion for wanting to do acting. I wanted a career in acting, and when I broached that subject with my parents, we're not huge. The Bahamas, we're not huge on the arts, or we weren't. And acting was not a career for my parents.
It was a hobby.
That wasn't even something to pursue.
Yeah.
It was like, so
the
the reality was like, you better go think again. You need a real job, because there ain't no job.
Right.
And so, fortunately for me, we grew up over our business. So we'd been working, whether it was in our food business or whether in our funeral business, our home was always over our business. Our grandparents, they lived over their business. So I'd been exposed to this. I was very good at the sciences, which you need to have a good background in that, because, to go into funeral services, you need to understand human biology, anatomy, and all of the other requisites that go into being an embalmer. And so it was a default call for me. But even though it was, I grew a lot of passion for it.
Yes.
I loved it. I was innovative. I felt my father had been innovative before me. I mean, my father was a trailblazer. He introduced cremations to the Bahamas way back in the 1960s.
Wow.
We had the first crematorium in the Bahamas. So, my father in his own right was a leader as well.
Yes.
So we had lots of examples around us, whether it was with the uncles, the aunts, the parents, the grandparents. There were always examples of people who were doing innovative things that were breaking new ground.
Yes. I'm getting an example here that leaders should be following, but specifically to people who have been almost forced to carry on somebody else's legacy, right? But you decided, okay, wait, if it is that I'm going to take this on, I'm still going to do it the way that Loretta will do this. This is still the dream. This is still the legacy that we're now going to advance, but we're going to do it with this level of thought, or this level of bravado, or this level of audacity, if you will.
Absolutely.
How does someone tap into that? Where do you go to find your own audacity?
I think a lot of it, sometimes people can nurture certain values, certain skill sets. I think a huge part of it is also nature. How confident are you as an individual? When I was a young child, I was probably precocious too. And you're talking about being audacious.
Yes.
I used to get report cards where the teacher always said, "Oh, she talks too much.
Yes.
Oh, she can do so much better if she stopped talking. Oh, she is disruptive." I got thrown out of a chemistry class.
Wow.
I don't mean just one class. I got thrown out for the rest of the semester.
Wow.
Because this chemistry teacher thought I was too disruptive. So I believe that, a lot of it is innate.
Yes.
I think nowadays children such as myself are perceived as being critical thinkers, being inquisitive,
Yes.
asking questions. They're probably disruptors. I think I disrupted every class I used to be in, every single class. But the most amazing thing is I still came out in the top.
Yes. Wow.
Even though the teachers were like, "Oh, she talks too much. Oh, so do not discourage your children from talking."
Yes.
And nowadays with all the social platforms and all of the technology they use, I find the kids are so introverted.
Yes.
They're truly, truly introverted. So there are times when I believe that if you want to develop interpersonal skills, and interpersonal skills are so important in whatever you're doing, whether it's your personal business, whether it's politics, whatever you're doing, interpersonal skills, as you well know, because you come from HR background
Yes.
and development, those are key. If I when my kids first got mobile phones and we would sit at the dinner table and they're looking down, I immediately made them put those away.
Yes.
Because you're becoming very antisocial. Computers, I think, when your kids get locked away with televisions, games, computers and stuff, you're not building great communication with them.
Yes.
I can be in the same room with you and I'm sending you a WhatsApp. I'm not looking at you and talking to you.
Wow.
Those are not, I think, attributes for effective communication.
Yes.
Obviously, if you're going to be in a leadership role, you want to be able to communicate effectively.
Yes.
And we're not going to create another generation of communicators by having everyone stuck behind a computer monitor.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion.
Absolutely. I want to shift and talk about how I've observed you in your organization, how I've observed you as a leader. You are the leader of the organization. You are there when someone is doing one of the most difficult things they can do in life. They are saying goodbye to a loved one. And I've observed you in funerals, present, not working. Perhaps you may be working, but you are present. You are consoling a mother, a brother, a son, a husband, a wife, while performing a service. Why is it important for you to be involved with that level of your business versus the strategy and the planning and the so on and so forth?
First of all, I believe that when someone experiences a death, they are probably at their lowest. They're very vulnerable. They need to feel that they're being well taken care of.
Yes.
I also believe that the whole thing, when I talk about interpersonal skills, the whole concept of just being able to sometimes sit with someone who is
Yes.
grieving, just to touch someone, you don't have to say a word. It imparts so much that is unspoken.
Yes.
Sometimes people do not want to talk. They just need to know that there is someone there that cares.
Yes.
They may want to cry a bit. You're there to give them that love, that
Yes.
support, that handkerchief. I think it's very important, but it also demonstrates to the people that work with me on my team
Yes.
that you're not just serving. You're here to care for this person.
Wow.
That's important. People know if you care about them.
Yes, they
People
can tell.
Obviously, you're going to, what you do, you're being paid.
Yes.
But you can go over and above.
Yes.
You can actually just share and feel that grief that mother. Today, we had a young man. No parent ever wants to be in a position of
Yes.
burying their child.
My God.
That's difficult.
Yes.
So I am a parent. I feel that pain.
Yes. Yes.
To be able to empathize, I believe, is so important. Whether it's in funeral service or whether it's with a coworker who's struggling with something.
Yes.
You've got to have a listening ear for individuals. Sometimes people come to work and you could see that
Something is wrong.
their A game ain't on today.
Yes. Yes.
They're not on their A game. And maybe you just need to pull them aside. Come on, man, let's have some cookies and
Yeah.
coffee. Let's talk. Let's see what's going. Maybe you need some time off.
Yes.
But people aren't always willing to tell you that. So I believe that one thing about us who lead organizations, we have to be attuned as well
Yes.
to those around us. But that all begins with the whole interpersonal skills. You get to know the people.
Yes.
You spend a lot of time with them.
Absolutely.
So you know if someone's not on their game today.
Yes.
Yesterday I went into work. I had a toothache out of this world.
Yes.
It was crazy. They realized that I wasn't myself. I had to go to the dentist.
Yes.
So they were then attuned to me. They was like, "Oh, Miss Turner, you need to go to the dentist."
Yeah.
And I'm so pleased because I know that once they're there, everything's going to be okay.
All
I
is
could go to
well.
the dentist.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's also about making sure that you're confident that the people that you work with, your team, even though they may be your employees, you realize that you're only as good as they are. So if they're as good as you can walk away.
Exactly. Now that I want to talk about. Two things I want to talk about: the empathy and the fact that if you have to, as a leader, you have to have your hand on it. It's more of a testament of your inability to lead than it is of your ability to lead.
I feel that way. I certainly feel that way.
Yes.
So you want to be able to build an organization that is strong, even when one of the links become weak.
Yes.
Or when one of the links have to be removed.
Yes.
Or has to be absent. You've got to have that resiliency. You've got to have the ability. And that's why I'm going to have you, Ahmad,
Yes.
to come and reinforce that,
Yes,
in
yes,
my
yes.
leadership. Because
Absolutely.
you also present a great, thing. You always want people to be learners.
Yes.
You do not want them to ever reach a position where they think, okay, I know everything, I can't grow anymore.
I know enough.
I believe that, to have someone such as yourself come into an organization, not only does it give fresh eyes and new ideas,
Yes.
I may be teaching one way and I may think I'm doing an excellent job, and maybe
Yes.
on the surface I am. But to have someone like yourself come into my organization, you may bring a whole different dynamic
Yes.
that may spur even that latent
Yes.
talent within our grouping.
Yes.
You may be able to spur that to even greater potential.
Absolutely. Wow. When we talk about, thank you, first of all.
You're welcome.
When we talk about the empathy, you mentioned 3 words: empathy, resilience, and then that learning thing. Listen, the one thing that I truly believe separates successful people from unsuccessful people is the learning aspect of life. As long as you are alive, you should be learning something. The difference, though, is when you apply what you've learned. Because Grammy taught us many things that we didn't necessarily apply. We knew better, but didn't really do better.
Do you find that you apply it more as you get older?
Definitely.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Because at the time,
This
those
was an
powerful
obstruction.
lessons.
This was some
absolutely.
nuisance.
That's right. But the greatest thing that we learn is that while we do not think we learned or we
Yes.
didn't take advantage of that, when we start repeating those same things, Grammy, those used to tell us.
And we mean it with such authority, and we
Absolutely.
realize how important it is to what it is that they could already see us falling into, the trap we were falling into.
And that's why I love the perspective of family.
Yes.
I think that intergenerational value that is brought by grandparents, great-grandparents, if you're fortunate,
Yes.
your parents, that is, that's the rock, if you will,
Yes.
upon which your house is built,
Yes.
upon which you grow. That foundation doesn't shift. That doesn't move.
That's good.
Biblically, they tell you, the silly man built his house
Yes,
upon the sand.
yes.
The wise man built his house upon the rock. Our rock is where we come from.
Yes.
Our rock are our antecedents, our
Yes.
parents, our grandparents. And, we don't like to be reprimanded.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
children, we don't enjoy being corrected. We hate sitting down listening to long, boring lectures.
Yes.
And you say, boy, what value is this going to have in my life?
Yes.
They've been around a long time. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Our parents never made half as much money as we make today.
Wow.
Our grandparents did not have half the education, formal education
Yes,
that we
yes.
have. They didn't have the opportunities. But look what they did.
Wow.
They were able to build homes
Yes.
without going to the bank, because whatever little they had,
Yes.
they made it work.
Absolutely.
And they were still able to feed us, clothe us, house us, educate us, and have a home for us.
Yes.
Do you know how many young people today are making tons of money and cannot own a home?
Wow.
A home is so important in that nurturing, and it doesn't have to be a mansion.
Yes.
A lot of us grew up in very small homes.
Yes.
We didn't have our own bedrooms.
Yes.
Let me speak to me,
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
younger than I am. We had one bedroom for the girls and one bedroom for the boys.
You said there were 5 girls.
There
and
were
2
5
boys.
girls, and all of us were sleeping in beds together.
Wow.
You understand?
Yes.
Some of us slept on the floor. When air conditioning came along, we all moved from the bedroom to the living room where they had air conditioning. We were all sleeping on the floor together.
Yes.
You know, that sort of thing people don't like to talk about, but that is the sort of thing that's the glue that teaches you all of the lessons that you need to learn.
Yes.
The hand-me-downs that you get from the siblings, whether it's the books, whether it's the clothes, whatever. We were taught it's not the abundance of things in life. It is the needs that were met, and that's all that we were allowed to have.
Yes.
Our needs.
Wow. Wow, that is so, it's not the abundance of things, it's the needs that are met.
That's right.
Wow, that is so good. Are you a leader that is focused on what you can get from your team or what you can pour into your team? The needs that you can meet as a leader. Are you the person in your organization that is focused more on the bottom line, the results, the process versus the person, the people you hired to bring that process to life? When you think about, you mentioned Grammys. My grandmother always says, I just pray for you all to behave yourself.
And
And
that was
is
powerful.
such a profound prayer, because the opposite of behaving is misbehaving.
And
Misbehaving is cause confusion.
And what they were saying is when they say behave yourself, they mean be respectful
Yes.
to your elders,
Yes.
be respectful to your superiors,
Yes.
and always have manners. Another thing they used to tell us is manners take you through the
Through
world.
the world. Through the world.
Manners.
Wow.
I mean, these are very profound things. So, yes, you talk about what is it that you want from your team? What are you pouring into them? Well, these seem simple lessons that our
Yes.
grandparents taught us is the basis, I think, for everything that we sort of evolve into. When they say take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of
Yes,
themselves.
Yes.
In other words, you take care of the little things, the business is going to grow. You take
Wow.
care of the little things, the dividends are going to come.
Yes.
Because you're investing in things that are important. You're investing in the human element. When people see you investing in the human element, I think they're going to appreciate that they understand the value of your involvement in the life of that being. You're not just my employee. Because without you, I can't do it.
Yes. Absolutely.
Even though I pay you,
Yes.
I can't do everything.
Yes.
I need you just like you need me. It's the synergy that we build together.
Absolutely.
It is so important, I believe, that we even understand that. So when you talk about national leadership, sometimes you look at persons whom we've elected
Yes.
and you say, boy, I don't know. I mean, whatever we say.
Yeah.
But the reality is this. We vote for a person for leadership or representation based on what they present to us.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't get to see exactly how they operate until after they are there.
Yes.
There are some persons that will not disappoint you, that will definitely live up to your expectations. There are others that where you have expectations, they may not be living up to those. I think it's also very important that those who come to you to say that they're going to serve, that they not lose sight of the fact that they are the servant.
Yes. Wow.
Even though you have given them the privilege
Yes.
to go and lead you, you gave them that privilege.
Yes.
You can take that away.
Wow.
So I think that is where we have a disconnect, where all of a sudden I become now an elected official. I have a driver, I have a secretary, I have this, all of a sudden I've arrived.
Yes.
Or let's use another example. I become CEO. All of a sudden I
Yes.
can no longer talk to my colleagues because now I'm the big cheese here in the
Yes.
office.
Yes.
Well, as soon as you start doing that and you realize that you are putting a lot of space between you and the people that made it possible to sit where you are, that is exactly when they start moving away. You start to lose influence, and essentially, you probably either get voted out or you become an ineffective CEO.
Absolutely. And the things that you were trying to protect or preserve are still going to be now at risk,
Absolutely.
because you're trying to preserve this organization that you want to separate yourself from, the people who you once were a part of. Even if you didn't come from that organization as, through the ranks. You came from once being an employee somewhere. You understood what it meant to be on the sidelines, in the thick of it. And now because you have mastered this position, you want to act as though that doesn't matter anymore.
I think the best example of that for those of us that did literature, and I think most of us have done that,
Yes.
George Orwell's Animal Farm,
Yes.
is the greatest example, in my opinion, of how people change. Remember the pigs?
Yes.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Yes.
By the end of the whole transformation, where they became the leaders, the pigs were walking on 2 legs.
Wow.
The pigs were mistreating the people that uplifted them to the
Yes.
position where they were. I think that is one of the greatest books in terms of how you can be so disingenuous. You can actually lose fact and lose the ability to lead.
Yes.
That's when you employ the squealers of the world to be the propagandists, to start changing the rules along the way, because all of a sudden you've ascended to the top
Yes.
position.
Yes.
When you get to that level, that is when people no longer trust you.
Wow.
When people no longer trust you, you are not going to be a leader.
You are
So
not.
I always look back on that book as being an amazing story of how the oppressed become the oppressors.
Wow. What do you think it is with humans, with human beings, that once underwent, they were in the trenches doing this thing, but when the opportunity comes, they disregard that and they almost double down on it? What happens in our minds? Why does that happen? Why does that take place, you feel, in your experience?
I think in everything you've got to prepare. Sometimes people are thrust in positions that they're not fully prepared for.
Yes.
And in terms of preparation, when you become the head of an organization, you're going to be exposed to things that you may or may not have been exposed to previously. You may be exposed to persons of even greater influence than yourself.
Yes.
And then you start to want that for yourself, if you will.
Yes.
Instead of wanting greater for those that allowed you to enjoy this position. I think it's when your ambition gets lost in your personal, should I say, gratification,
Yes.
wanting things for yourself as opposed to wanting things for the greater good
team.
of the team.
People-
And I use that very generally because I don't want to be specific to say just organizations,
Yes.
politics, but I believe that sometimes it's important to be exposed. It's important to make sure that we as parents also expose our kids, because if they grow up and, all of a sudden they were deprived of something and they're thrust into an environment where there are people that have lots of things and all of a sudden they want to have those same things.
Yes.
You need to be grounded that, those things, those material things are not an indication of your personal value, your worth.
Yes.
You understand? We don't have to have the name brands to be Ahmad,
Yes.
Rashad, Thompson,
Yes.
because your name, I don't know if you noticed anything about me, but let me share something with your audience.
Sure.
You would never see me wearing something that is emblazoned with designer names.
Yes.
They're not paying me enough for me to advertise for them.
Absolutely.
You understand?
Yes.
But yet we go into the store to buy the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton. And that's fine. I'm not trying to down it for those who do. But do you know that if you weren't wearing that, when you wear that, you're a walking advertisement for Mr. Gucci?
Yes. Wow.
So why don't we support our own people?
Yes.
Why don't we be? I'm so driven in supporting what is Bahamian. I don't mind wearing a Bahamian product.
Yes.
Someone saying, "Oh, where'd you get that?" And I'll be, well, this person, they're creative. They made this beautiful straw handbag like the one I'm toting
Yes,
today.
yes.
I would carry a Bahamian handbag any day before you see me carrying whatever,
Yes.
because I also realize that I am Bahamian.
Yes.
And I want to uplift my brothers, my sisters that are creatives, and I want us all to rise with the tide.
Absolutely.
And so I think that even the choices we make, it may not be something I say, but just you looking at me, you say, Loretta's wearing that Bahamian thing. That looks
Yes.
really nice. I like
Yes.
that. I want to go buy one of those.
Yes.
You're putting $1 in that
somebody else's
person's
pocket, yes.
pocket.
Absolutely.
You're making them stronger.
Yes.
You're making your country a leader. You're building up all the resources in your country.
That's so good.
We need to also realize that leadership is not just about individuals. It's about where we stand in the love of our country and how do we stand up for that.
Yes. You talked earlier about the word resiliency. This is probably going to get me in trouble, the statement, but I feel like the generations that are coming up now, you talked about the children being locked away in computers and the iPads and the technology, and there's this lack of human connection and being able to resolve conflict and be disappointed but not broken. To have somebody to make you frustrated and not resolve to harming yourself. What has caused you to be so resilient in your way of doing business, in your leadership style? What can you do? What can you say to someone who is struggling with being resilient in leadership?
I think that you can easily become broken when you have failures or what you perceive to be failures.
Yes.
I adopted Nelson Mandela. I mean, there was no greater man, I believe, that had been really knocked down, imprisoned, but still came back with such a humble spirit that made such a huge difference in turning South Africa around,
Yes.
getting blacks to be considered as equals. And one of the things he said, which I absolutely love, is, I never lose, I learn.
Yes.
So there are times when failures will arise. I believe there are many times when people will say no. There are times when your dreams can be dashed. There are times when people will sabotage you. If you hold that in your heart with anger,
Yes.
you're not going to be able to manifest your full self because there's so much energy going into that anger, going into that disappointment. And I think all of this comes with age and being able to introspect and to understand. I'm a lot calmer person than I am when I was younger.
Yes.
I was probably a lot more impulsive when I was younger. I know
Yes.
that to be a fact. But I think that the most important thing that I have learned over the years is truly to be able to realize that, in every disappointment, it's for a reason. It's for a
Yes.
purpose. It's
Yes.
not the end of the world. So resilience is built by picking yourself back up. Sometimes you have to go undercover to reinvent yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Because you cannot reach your fullest potential in the open. There'll always be detractors.
Yes.
There'll always be people trying to pull you down. So sometimes you just have to pull away from the crowd. You've got to exhale.
Yeah.
You've got to reevaluate everything that happened. And you know what? You're able to say, now how do we move from this position to this position?
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes you have to reinvent yourself.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to retool yourself. Sometimes you need to pull in somebody else that may be younger than you, but that can teach you something.
Yes.
When I first went on the computer, I was totally illiterate. I thank goodness for my children. They taught me
Yes.
so much.
Yes.
So also don't be so old or so big that you think that somebody lesser than yourself can
Yes,
teach
can
you.
teach
We
you.
can learn from everyone.
Everyone and everything.
We can learn from everyone.
I feel like there are so many opportunities leaders abandon or don't even get to take full advantage of because they feel like letting someone that's lesser than them help them is some admission of
Someone who they perceive as lesser than them.
Their perception is that
perception.
this person is less than I am or not worthy of what I have. First of all, you hired them, so that doesn't even make sense to me. The second thing is we should be able to learn from anything and every circumstance we find ourselves in.
Exactly.
Anyone. You also talked about innovation. right? I believe that innovation is defined as doing what's always been done and what's never been done before, right? So your dad buried people. That's been happening for centuries.
From 1953.
There we go. But then dad said, wait now, I learned about this other practice where you can, if a person doesn't wish to be buried, there's another option we could explore.
And it was like met with so much pushback.
Wow.
Who can burn twice?
Yes.
People,
Who's gonna burn twice?
people ask questions like, burn?
Yes.
Dying for us.
Yes.
Dying. So also sometimes you're absolutely right. The innovation, the just changing the thought, And now I can honestly tell you, we've gone from having one crematorium in the entire Bahamas to probably having, I would guess, maybe about 6 now.
Wow.
Okay? And I believe that every one of the funeral homes that actually have crematoriums find that there's an uptick now, especially post-COVID.
Yes.
With persons choosing cremation.
Wow.
So while it was introduced in 1967, here we are now in 2024, decades later,
Yes.
where people were running out of space for burials.
Yes.
So sometimes even when you innovate, you don't see the value
Wow.
of your innovation at that time.
Yes.
My father is now, in his eternal rest.
Yes.
But now you see such an uptick for something like this. And sometimes with the leaders, you see them, they are ahead of their time. I don't want to draw any examples here, but I'm out of politics now. But when people say, "Boy, I should have listened to you,"
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
it's always sometimes in hindsight.
Yes.
It's in hindsight.
Yes.
So, for my father, he would be proud to know today that not only do we use cemeteries, we've got mausoleums where people can actually go and inter their ashes, because we have evolved.
Yes.
We've evolved to a different thinking as well.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it takes a while. It took decades for Bahamians to really think up in this way.
Yes.
I think more of the younger people. And sometimes leaders will present things that are not accepted at the time.
Yes.
But like history, it is marked in time. And they be,
Yes.
boy, he knew what he was talking about,
Yes, yes.
The same way we didn't listen to our grandparents.
Yes, yes.
Who told us when we were kids, boy, they know what they was talking
Yes,
about,
yes. I remember
So
onto
I
something.
think that leadership is sometimes not truly appreciated at the time. It's probably appreciated after its time.
Yes. There's a statement that I've referenced several times throughout this podcast so far. Leaders are to be concerned with the future they may not get to ever see.
Very well said.
You
Very
may be
well
in a
said.
position of establishing a legacy that you may never get to experience.
That is so true.
And I think that leaders who absolutely take that as their mantra, that I am securing the future for someone that I may never get to meet, is what a true leader is.
That is powerful.
Wow.
That is powerful. I hope you write that down.
I did.
That is so powerful because when people talk about contemporary history, something that happened last year may not be fully seen in context until 10 years later.
Yes, yes.
I remember, and I've got to give kudos to Hubert Ingram. I remember during our administration when he was reforming all the roads here in New Providence. It inconvenienced businesses. Some, yes, unfortunately went down, but we had an aged water system. We needed the expansion with the amount of roads. We were having roadblocks and gridlocks and everything. That new road that goes to the airport, that comes down to the University of the Bahamas, and all the new roads, Milo Butler Highway that goes all the way to the southern end of New Providence, the Frank Watson. What did we do? We created a song would say the road them dig up, dig up, dig up, dig up. And he got voted out.
Wow.
He got voted out for having the road them dig up, dig up, dig up,
Yes.
because nobody saw the full impact
Wow. What
of
was
the
to come?
vision. Okay? Now,
Everybody's
thank
smooth
God,
sailing. Just
we
driving.
could get from, seriously, if I want to get from north to south in New Providence, we have a corridor that goes from Bay Street straight down to Cowpen Road.
Yes.
And the same vice versa. You want to
Yes.
come from out west from Gladstone Road, you have a corridor that takes you straight up to Seabreeze.
Yes.
That is leadership vision.
Wow.
And sometimes, like I said, the people that are in that time zone with you may not be able to envision it.
Yes.
But look at the growth of the amount of vehicles that are on the roads
Yes.
today. If that road expansion had not taken place, we would all be stuck every day
Yeah. Pile up.
in traffic.
Pile up.
So I use that as an example.
Yes.
You are sometimes punished for being a good leader.
Wow. For being innovative, for following the vision. What do you say? How do you inspire innovation, though? How do you, as a leader, inspire innovation on your teams? Because it's one thing for the leader to be innovative or to have a vision. But for that team to buy into that vision, supported by innovation, how do you
I
inspire
think
innovation?
the leader has to open up to the fact that, the first thing you're going to say to your team is that, hey, I don't have all the answers.
Ah, yes.
There is nobody that has all the answers.
Yes.
You look at Steve Jobs.
Yes.
How did he innovate with Google and all this other
Yes,
stuff?
Apple.
With Apple.
Yes.
How did he innovate? He didn't have an office where the doors were closed.
Yes.
He came into work every day, white t-shirt, black pants, and everyone sort of collaborated.
Yes.
What is it that you're bringing to the table today,
Yes.
young man? What is it that we can do to make this a better product? If the leader gives the impression they have all the answers, then you're actually stifling your team
Yes.
from growing and helping you to grow.
Yes.
I think one of the great things we do now in the corporate world is that, back in the day we always had to, and I don't think this is disrespectful.
Sure.
Back in the day we always were Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so. The new mindset is a more casual approach, a more approachable approach, if you
Yes,
will.
yes.
So we all work together, we collaborate together, we create together. There is no one person that is imbued with all knowledge.
Yes.
And so together we're stronger. Together, you're my team. I know that when you develop something, you're making me look good, even though I am the leader.
Yes.
So no, you've got to give the assurance that you're open to new thoughts. You're open to ideas. You're going to accept them and adopt them as well.
Yes.
I think that's important.
This is so good. That those last two words, the accept and adopt. Because so many people are threatened by the ingenuity on the teams that they created. Why would you want to bring somebody in that's sharp and that's talented, and then when they start to sharpen and become more talented, you become confronted by that or you become challenged by that?
That's your leadership insecurity. That is your insecurity in yourself.
Yes.
Leaders will have insecurity, like all human beings. We all have insecurities.
Yes.
But you cannot allow your insecurity to override the ability of those that work with you to be innovative.
Wow. You cannot allow your insecurity to override those that work with you to be innovative.
Absolutely. You're going to be insecure. Don't you know that if this nail in your house is going to make your house stronger?
Yes.
What, you going to put a crooked nail in?
Wow.
No, let's go with this guy. This
Yes.
is an innovative nail. I want this nail in my house.
Wow. This is so good. When you think of your journey in leadership, your journey in business, moving into politics at one point, and then reverting back to your family business, what is the one thing, if you can limit it to one thing, would you say was the most important for your journey in leadership?
That's a really good question. I believe that if I had to pick one thing, is probably being able to be agile. I think agility is important. In other words, being able to pivot.
Yes.
Sometimes we become so stuck in what we know, what we do, that we ourselves become inflexible. So I don't think you can ever get to a point where you're inflexible. You got to be able to, especially in this world today where
Yes,
things happen
yes.
so quickly. You've got to be able to spin like a dime.
Yes.
So I think you've got to be agile, but that also includes keeping your mind, up to date with what's going on around you.
Yes.
So the agility probably starts in your mental and your psyche, and of course, being able to accept that. So agility, I would say, and
think
adaptability.
I agree with you 100%. I'm giving a presentation next month, well, in June of 2024, where I will be speaking on the topic agile or fragile.
Really?
Because you have to understand that agility is a superpower, and the lack of it will 100% result in fragility. You will break, you will be lost in the sauce, if
See,
you will.
I didn't even know that. You see this?
Yes.
Look at this. Look at
Yes.
this synergy we're building here.
Absolutely. And I feel like leaders who are holding on to what was, not using what was, not relying on the experience that comes from what was, but holding on for their life to the way we used to do it and the way we used to be, we are risking losing the future.
You are. Because those persons under you, you're absolutely right. They're going to go to see where they can reach their full potential.
And
If you're not going to allow them to reach that potential,
best.
they're going elsewhere.
They're going to leave. And I frame the topic so starkly because it's literally that simple. Are you agile or are you fragile? It's as simple as that.
You're a thought leader,
Thank you, Mom. I received that.
You're a thought leader.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. I received
And let me
that.
tell you, that is so important because even when we look at social media today, I know that I am quite a bit older than you are. And we have all these people that say they're innovators and they're digital this and they're all of that.
Yes.
But I think there's a huge difference with being a thought leader, a
Yes.
thought innovator, because you have got to have that agility.
Yes.
You've got to be able to keep your mind constantly thinking about other things. So being a thought leader is important,
Wow.
is
Thank
really
you.
important.
Thank you.
And that agility versus fragility, that's a powerful sermon.
Yeah. And the way it's prepared, or the way I'm being led to prepare it, it sometimes does feel like a sermon because, as I've said several times in this podcast, Madam Butler-Turner, I can't bring myself to call you by your first name. I just can't do it. But I feel like we are risking the future of the world when we sit by and let things happen. Leaders are supposed to cause things happen. They're not supposed to let things happen. When you let things happen, you're saying, forget this, I'm done. You've given in, you've given up. But we are at a place in our history where we don't have blaring examples of what strong, good, sound, decent leadership is anymore. We have people who are running the countries, running organizations who are in it for themselves. And they are creating a culture of fragility. Do what I say or risk losing everything. Versus challenge what I say so we can build everything. And to me, it warrants speaking to people in a way where it feels almost sermonic. Because you have to wake up. You have to realize that the world is leaving us if we let it.
Absolutely.
But if you decide that, wait a minute, the things that I were taught, the tenets that I held on to, that my father instilled in me, that may have to be a new spin put on it, but the thing is still, respect is still respect. Mm-hmm. Whether we're calling you Mrs. Butler-Turner or, hey, Retta, how you doing today? At the end of the day, if I respect you as an individual, that respect, the tenet taught by our grandparents and great-grandparents is still there.
Absolutely.
Irrespective of the modality that we choose to display it. And I think the world today has allowed, we have allowed people to distort and to deteriorate what examples of leadership are. And this podcast, conversations like these, conversations like the one I will have in June at the SHRM conference, is because of the fact that we need to ensure that people understand that we are at risk of losing everything if we do not stop it. If we continue to operate in this way of what used to be what once was. I am not saying to discount the lessons you were taught. Those things help us to get forward. History can only repeat itself if we let it. But we could also learn from history when we apply it.
That's right.
And if we decide to let the world go,
we must learn from
we
history.
must learn. And we can only learn once we apply.
That's right.
Knowledge on its own is not power. Mm-hmm. Knowledge on its own is worthless. It's the application of knowledge that leads to empowerment. And when Grammy said, don't do that, Loretta, because that can cost you. Oh, who's you talking to, but you go do it, what happens?
You get
you
your
suffer
foot.
the
That's right.
consequence.
That's right.
But if you apply what Grammy said, okay, nah, Grammy, I didn't like that. But when I did that, boy, that did something for me.
And that's powerful. And that I think really is a huge part of where we are lacking in certain spaces
Wow.
for leadership. I think truly that, a lot of people need to introspect more.
Yes.
But they've got to be honest with themselves.
Absolutely.
Introspection requires a high level of honesty. You've got to admit where you're not strong.
Wow.
When you lead an organization or lead a company, whatever, if you lack a certain skill, you want to bring that skill on board.
Yes, yes.
You want to go and get an individual that
Yes.
has that skill you do not have.
Yes.
You're not going to be threatened by that individual because they have that skill. You have other skills.
Yes.
There is no one that's going to have all
All
skills
the
that
skills
they
at all
need.
time. Absolutely not.
But I think one of the biggest challenges I have experienced, I used this with one of my leaders once.
Yes.
And I said to him, a basketball team got 5 members.
Yeah.
You look at them, and they're just like the fingers on our hands. We're not all the same length. I said the
Yes.
center is taller, so on and so forth. But together, we need each other. And at the end of the day, if this team is a good team, the accolades go to you.
Absolutely.
You're the captain.
Absolutely.
Do you know that leader could not see that?
Wow. Wow.
And so when you look at where we are as a country today, when you look at national leadership and you see the fight that's going on in one of our leading political organizations, it is really sad that you have to go through all of this just because some people, and I'm going to say it, some people like the fact of being in charge.
Yes. They want to hold on
I
to
don't
what
mind
is.
you being in charge if you're effective.
Yes. Absolutely.
But don't tell me you want to be in charge because you want to be in charge.
Yeah, ain't nothing happening. No
You know?
results.
So the
Wow.
reality is that is a great example, I believe, of us as Bahamians having the opportunity to make sure that, we too, because we're ultimately the ones that are in charge.
Yes.
We're in charge with our vote.
Absolutely.
We're in charge with our choices.
Yes.
And so, if there is something that is presented to us, whether it's a plate of food and we don't want to have it, or it's a candidate and we don't want it, we just don't take that particular
Yes.
one.
Yes.
And we've got to know that we have the power to say, no, thank you.
Indeed. Indeed. Oh, this is so good. As we wrap up our conversation today, I have 2 questions for you, final questions for you. One, what advice do you give to leaders today, whether you are a brand new leader, whether you are someone transitioning in your leadership journey, whether you are someone that's tenured in leadership? What advice do you give that person or those people? The second question is, what, after this is all said and done, what would you like the legacy of Loretta Butler-Turner to have been?
Well, I think that one of the things that you want to know what leaders can do.
Yes.
I believe that every leader will leave a legacy, whether it's good or bad. And at the end of the day, those around us, will judge it.
Yes.
Judge your leadership capacity. As leaders, if we leave a void where there is no succession, I believe that you have not served the greater interest for the greater good for the
Yes.
majority. So you've actually done a disservice to the whole concept of leadership.
Wow.
You cannot have been a leader and exit, and there is no natural progression for someone or something to fall in place.
Yes.
So I think that is probably the most important thing. I think for Loretta Butler-Turner, at this juncture of my life, I would like to be remembered for being a strong Bahamian woman, someone who truly is so grateful for the fact that I have been born at a time such as this, to be in a country such as this, and to be able to have seen so many changes, and to have been able to contribute in some small way to where we are today. But most importantly, the fact that I'm a proud Bahamian.
Yes. It is always such an absolute pleasure to engage you in conversation, to chat with you, to learn from you. I think that you are an example, Mrs. Butler-Turner, of what it means to be an audacious, fearless, but sensitive and humane leader. To see a thing through, to fight for it, to honor it, to cherish it, and to respect it. So many leaders are in positions and they are just so disrespectful to the opportunity. They mismanage it. But you have shown us again today in this short conversation why it is so important to respect the opportunities we get, to honor them by doing the best we can with them, and to ensure that succession can take place.
I think
It's the only way to really guarantee legacy. Legacy only continues when there is succession. If there is no successor, then you have not been successful. And I think that is such a profound message to share with our audience today. Thank you so much.
Ahmad, I'd like to thank you very much from the depth of my heart for doing what you're doing, this service to not just the Bahamas. I imagine your podcast will be seen outside of the Bahamas.
Yes, ma'am.
As a young innovator, as a young thought leader, I want to commend you, and I thank you very much for having me on this show. I mean, I feel very privileged, even though
thank you so much.
I feel very privileged. Thank you kindly.
You are welcome. The privilege is truly mine. I don't take for granted that you could be somewhere else, that you could be imparting wisdom elsewhere, that you could be choosing to do something else with your day. But to be here with this audience, with us, with helping us to get better, helping people to see a good example of what it means to be a good leader. That is something I do not take for granted. So thank you so much. You have been tuned in to such an empowering episode of the iLEAD podcast, where I know for certain you have learned, you are empowered, you have learned to adapt and be agile, and to learn how to disrupt. Not to disturb, not to destruct, but to disrupt. You've heard from a young lady that went against the grain, that defied tradition, so that she could build a legacy that would still serve those that challenge that defying of tradition, that defiance of tradition. You have understood how important it is to learn, to self-evaluate, to understand that the only way to get better is to continue to get better. You can't stop because you've arrived, because you have a master's level of accolade. You must continue the fight. This has been such a wonderful opportunity for me, so I know that it's been an opportunity for you. I want you to seriously think about where you are right now in your leadership journey. What can you be doing differently to arrive at another point, another elevation in your journey of leadership? This podcast is not just a good conversation. It's not just a good story that we tell. It's helping you to find the principles you need to elevate your leadership legacy. This is the place you've come to learn, empower, adapt, and disrupt. This is the place your leadership legacy begins. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. Like, share, subscribe to all the things. Share this with somebody you know needs to have this conversation to make themselves a better version of them. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for learning with us. God bless you. Take care.